Okay, welcome everyone to tonight's land use, landmarks and planning meeting. My name is Ken Crouch. I'm the vice chair of the committee. And this meeting is called to order at 6:34.
Yeah.
Yes. Tonight we're joined by Lee Nixon, our assistant district manager.
Yep.
Perfect. And in order to conduct a efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. First,
There we go. You definitely have four now.
okay, that's fine.
Slow. I know how to do it. We just started.
Good, we just started. So I will go back to this previous point. Okay, so folks, in order to conduct an efficient meeting, let's observe a few ground rules. No one may speak until granted the floor. CB11 members, if you have a question about board business or wish to make a motion, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. Raise your hand through Zoom, click the participants icon, and you will find the raise hand function there. If you have technical difficulty, click the chat icon and relay your difficulty to staff. Members should not engage in a back and forth discussion. The chair will recognize the next person to speak. The chat should not be used for CB11 business or questions about agenda topics. All such remarks should be made on the record when recognized. Please keep your questions and comments brief and on topic to the discussion. Members of the public, if you have a question or comment about the subject on the agenda, please raise your hand and wait to be recognized. We'll now take attendance by roll call.
Okay, committee members, just to note for a record, there are 12 members in total, 7 are needed for quorum. Adeb Briha, Kenneth Crouch,
Present.
Jessica Elliott,
Present.
Alicia Foster Hernandez, Arnice, excuse me, Foster Hernandez.
Present.
Thank you. Pascal Hano, present. Thank you. Jessica Morris.
Yes.
Thank you. Nilsa Orama.
Present.
Thank you. Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Thank you. Derek Sampone.
Present.
Vinny Torres.
Present.
Thank you. Jason Villanueva. Now, Candy Vives Vasquez. You have form chair, or vice chair, excuse me.
Perfect, thank you. Okay. The agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online.
You are part of me? Oh, no, sorry, Jewel. Jewel Jones?
Here.
Okay, thank
Okay,
you.
super cool.
Let me just, yeah, I did not know that. I'll update that. Thank you for, stating that, Jewel.
Okay, the agenda for tonight's meeting was distributed ahead of time by the board office and was posted online. If there's no objection, we will adopt the agenda as stated. Committee members, if you object to adopting the agenda, you may raise your hand to be recognized. Okay, seeing no objections, the agenda for tonight's meeting is adopted. The meeting minutes from our last meeting were not distributed to committee members ahead of time.
We can vote on that next meeting.
I mean, it'll take us out of the slide there.
Oh,
They are, I did.
but they're complete and they are correct. Should we bundle that for the next meeting or what's the other?
I would hold off until public.
Yeah, okay,
If the committee hasn't reviewed it and you guys are not comfortable,
right.
I would hold off.
I think that makes perfect sense. Thank you. Okay,
Any information? The minutes are found in the shared G drive under the land use folder.
Yes, they ideally are, but I don't believe the
The draft,
finalized version
yeah.
that Kenneth submitted is in there. I was trying to do that once he submitted, but
no, totally understandable. Yeah, that's on me. Okay, so we will.
but I might be able to do that a little bit if I can try to copy and paste in the meantime.
Oh, yeah, let me know. We can definitely circle back if there's time. Okay. Now, are there any announcements or informational updates? Before we go further to the agenda. Seeing none.
Wait, Kenneth,
Oh, so sorry.
actually.
So, Angel asked me to give you all an update on City of Yes. If you're
Oh,
interested.
perfect. Yes,
Okay.
yes, you recognize.
Okay, so, the end of September, the City Planning Commission voted on the City of Yes for Housing Opportunity Text Amendment. It was dramatic, they had been meeting every 2 weeks to discuss elements of it. And it passed with a vote with 3 no votes. And the no votes mostly were upset about the lack of any required affordable housing elements to it. It now goes to, city council. City council has scheduled their hearing on this for October 22nd at 9:30, and it'll likely go all day long. And it's the CPC modified the text. There are a lot of little changes, but there are two changes that the CPC modified before they sent it over, which I think are relevant to this community. The biggest one is that if you recall, one of the changes was infill on campuses, meaning, so you have buildings surrounded by open space, a kind of tower in the park. They changed the rules to make plopping buildings in that open space very easy. And what they've done is they have removed any campus that needs Section 18 approval from HUD, which is NYCHA, from this. So NYCHA is no longer eligible for the campus infill provisions that they are proposing. That was something that the City Planning Commission adopted before it even went to City Council. It was kind of surprising, but they said that they didn't want this to apply to NYCHA. They've also removed the 10-year sunset provision for off-site affordable. So the way it worked previously is that if you could currently do your affordable housing off-site, they were allowing that to continue for 10 years. So that, you know, if you had plans and you were gonna do it, it wouldn't affect those plans. They're just removing it entirely, so you can be able to do affordable housing off-site. It will not sunset.
So they can do affordable housing costs,
Yeah,
like later.
later. Well, no, I mean, it's still the same rules that they have now, which essentially are you have to provide the affordable housing, but it can be off-site as opposed to in the building. They, you know, they're saying they said that they were gonna phase that out, that you're gonna have to do it in the building. And they're not doing that.
So they could put affordable housing anywhere.
Well, it's anywhere within the same community district or within a half a mile of the project.
Is that similar to what was done at Hudson Yards?
Oh, you mean where they gerrymandered stuff?
Yeah.
That's,
It's
no,
different.
that's a
Okay.
little different. I mean,
Alright.
this is the zoning offsite, which is really within the same community district or within a half a mile of the project.
Thank you.
How common is that?
It depends. So like on the Upper East Side where they're using the R10 optional bonus, everybody does it. Or near like, let's say 90% do it. But in East Harlem where we have the inclusionary housing areas, I don't know that anybody's done it in East Harlem, because it's easier to you control it, you do it in your own building. So it really depends on where you are and what type of building you're doing. If you're doing condos, you almost always do it off-site because of the difficulty doing affordable condos. Affordable homeownership is very difficult. Anyway, that's it. So again, October 22nd is the hearing at council. There are issues, things that you want to affect beyond, personally, because I know the board has already taken its position. Now is the time to go to your council members because they will be voting, and the vote is early December, Colin.
Oh, it's moving. So George, just for a quick clarification, thank you for that. You know, providing us a lot of insights on some of this and giving that clarity that we often fail to have. So you're saying that on the city of yes for the development, but that are taking, for those that are gonna be taking advantage of it, there's no affordable housing included on site. And there's an off site that they can't, is it a requirement or?
I'm sorry, I'm being, right. So if you have an option to do affordable housing and you take the benefit,
Right,
you can do the housing either on-site or off-site.
so when you say you can, is that still an option now, or
It's
is
an
that a
option.
requirement?
No, it's an option.
So I can opt not to do any of it,
Yes, that's true.
so I can opt not to do any affordable.
That there are no requirements for affordable housing other than
So there's no
MIH
requirement.
areas, which we already know about, right? So it's,
Which is already mandatory.
yeah. Right.
Wow, Okay,
That's the way it's written. It is
and,
entirely carrot and no stick.
right, and the board's CB11's position on the matter was in favor of CFS.
Yes, you had some, no's, there were
Wasn't
15
that-
elements.
Wasn't that with some conditions, wasn't it related to affordable?
We had some disagreement with some portions of it, but it's kind of an all or nothing proposition, so I think overall, we decided, given. That it's designed to create more about affordable housing and that it'll build more housing, I think our overall perspective was, I think A committee was a yes.
Yeah, I
Thank you.
wasn't.
Yeah, go ahead, oh, sorry, Jessica.
Just a question and a comment.
Yeah.
I'll start with a comment. Pretty much in response to Vinnie's dismay. I know that there are a lot of other affordable housing advocates in the city entities that are voicing incredible concern for the lack of mandatory affordability in the package. So, Vinnie, you're not alone. I don't know where that leaves us, necessarily. My question is just a refresher on the alert process, since my brain is kind of scrambled now. CPC has amended, council is now voting, and then it goes to the mayor.
Yes. That's right.
Okay. Right. Oh, sorry, go to the office of the mayor.
Yeah.
Very good, thank you. If the mayor does now sign it, it goes back to council and becomes law.
Oh, if the mayor does not sign it. I mean, which never happens, it would be, okay, so no, what happens is that would be a veto of it, which the council can override. Bloomberg did that. Yes.
Are we expecting,
What is?
there's some challenge in council? My understanding.
My understanding is that there's serious challenges in council, especially in the low density districts. One of the 3 no votes was the commissioner from Staten Island. The Eastern Queens, Southern Brooklyn have a lot of concerns. You know, out there, there are no affordable housing options. Meaning, at least in Manhattan, there's an option for affordable housing, but out there's not even that. And so Adrian Adams was on the record today saying that there should be some affordable housing requirements.
Right,
And I don't think it was an accident that she said that.
right, at least at some level, okay. They're gonna fight for at least some level now.
They should.
How is the timeline affected if council decides to make amendments, like including a requirement for affordable housing? Does it have to circle back and go to the planning commission again, back to community board?
So it will not go back to the community boards. It will go back to the planning commission for, they have to say whether it is within scope of the environmental review. And they have a very limited area where they can say, yes, it's within scope, no, it's not within scope. I would think that a affordable housing requirement would not be in scope, because that was not studied in the environmental review. I think when she's talking about an affordable housing requirement, that's something they're gonna have to do extra on top of, like in a housing plan or something like that, which that's my opinion. I don't know how you can make a requirement that was not studied in the environmental review at this point.
Right,
And then, just, sorry, follow up, as far as a policy overlay that would make affordability mandatory, there's been some talk about a universal and mandatory,
Yes,
inclusionary housing component. Would that be something that we could bring up or advocate for? I mean, I don't know if it would matter.
I think there's a lot of jurisdictions that do that. All the jurisdictions in Westchester County have a 10% affordable housing mandatory requirement. They were dragged there kicking and screaming, but they're there and they've been producing these units. If you have a project of 5 or more units, you have to produce 10% affordable housing in Westchester County. And you could argue that 10% of everything is more than 20 or 25% of something, right? But to me, I don't know if that's been studied, right? I don't know what would produce more, frankly. I have no idea.
Yeah.
And whenever, this concept was brought up, it was dismissed out of hand by DCP staff during the process. Other community boards talked about this a lot. And they were just like, it will not work. And they didn't provide any data for that. So, you know, if it is something that you think is a good idea, I think it's always good when citizens go out and try to affect policy that they think is good. There's nothing wrong with that.
Individual written statements.
Yeah, right. But, you know, to go back to your question about what happens, you know, in terms of the timeline, there may be an extra 15 days added for that scope determination, but that's it. It's on rails right now. And it will either, be voted up, voted down, or modified, you know, in this year.
Any other additional questions for George? And sorry, I almost skipped you, George, but thank you for that. Okay, that will conclude our announcements and informational updates. We'll move on to board business and talk about presentations and discussions. So first, we are continuing our discussion and vote regarding land use application 240385 MMM 240386 ZMM and 240387 HAM. Wait, one more, 240388 ZRM. That's the Beacon Mixed Use Development Project. And just as a reminder, folks, our community board review period began on September 18th, 2014, and must be completed by November 18th, 2024. So folks, I know we listened to the presentation last month. Do we have any questions? And I don't know if we have folks on.
You asked me to prepare something.
Oh,
Or Angel did.
okay, George, without further ado, please go ahead and.
All right, it's short, it's relatively short. Okay, great,
The beacon.
yeah.
Yes.
All right, it's good on.
You want me to control it? All right, awesome. Okay. With that. Oh, okay, so we scroll this.
Yes.
All right, fine. Okay, so you have to make a recommendation on the beacon, right?
Yes.
Proposed behind the multi-service center at 120th Street, east of First Avenue. Here's the rendering that they've been using. It's, the project details are between 17 and 21 stories, 170 to 210 feet. Includes the rehabilitation of the multi-service center, about 230,000 square feet of new residential development, 7.2 FAR, 100% affordable with 281 units. The housing unit detail, 100% affordable, as I was saying, 91 units at 30 to 50% of AMI. It's the, you know, this is according to the ELA program, extremely low and low, which is what the, you know, which is exactly what the East Harlem neighborhood plan called for, right? Is that these sites would be developed 100% affordable at, using the ELA program. Has 147 units at between 70 and 80, 43 units for formerly homeless, 0 market rate, 0 at more than 80%. It has a mix of 71 studios on up to 53 3-bedroom units, which, you know, a fair number of 3-bedroom units in this.
And if I may, George, based off of the advocacy of this board, they increased those numbers.
I believe that's right. I
It's in the appendix of their presentation.
And so, as I said, this was part of the 2016 East Harlem Neighborhood Plan. It was identified as one of the public sites. And it's in the points of agreement, right here. This is the map from the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan, HRNA Multi-Service Center. Proposed rezoning such as R8 on the narrow streets, R10 on wide streets to maximize affordability. Now, in 2018, prior to the release of the RFP, this committee. Now, I know a lot of you weren't here in 2018, but this committee spent a lot of time studying scenarios. We hired an architect. We toured the multi-service center with NILSA to like see if it could be converted. Or I'm sorry, adapted, whether it was, sound enough to be remodeled. We developed these different scenarios, one where we just get rid of the multi-service center entirely, some where we rebuild it into the building, others where we remodel it and put the affordable building behind it, separate buildings. We really studied a lot of different scenarios, and ultimately the recommendation of this board was this right here, where you have an affordable building behind a renovated multi-service center. The multi-service center would stay there, but be renovated. It had about 200,000 square feet of residential floor area, about 50,000 square feet for the multi-service center. It was about 7.2 FAR. And when you compare that with what you recommended in 2018, with what was being proposed right now, holy, this is like really, really freaking close. I mean, and if we can talk about the differences, what they're proposing is better, right? We didn't spend a lot of time noodling this. We were like taking all different kinds of options, and this was it. This blocks a lot of these rear facing windows in the multi-service center. This keeps them open.
Yeah.
And it keeps a nice big open space here, which we had broken up into two pieces. This is a better design, and it follows essentially the putting it behind and preserving the multi-service center. And again, this is what you asked for in 2018, and this is our current proposal 6 years later. Now, the current proposal is slightly larger, but the FAR is the same. And how is that? Right? That's not supposed to happen, right? Is ultimately, it's a ratio. You're not supposed to be able to increase one without the other. And the reason that they were able to do this, and this is just something that we knew about, but we didn't deal with it at the time, is that when Wagner Houses was built, East 120th Street was widened from 60 feet to 80 feet. And this left part of the multi-service center in the street. It wasn't even in a lot, right? It was in the map street. And so their current plan, it's a nice solution. What they do is they say, well, we're gonna put it back to 60 feet street, at least this portion of it. And so that means that the lot gets bigger. And since the lot gets bigger, the building can get bigger. And it also allows for ADA compliant ramps to be constructed to provide access to the multi-service center. And you get a few dozen extra housing units out of it, which is, a way to maximize your affordability, right? So, and all you're doing is changing the map street. So the current proposal reflects what this board asked for and worked to make happen over the past 10 years. All right, so in review, the East Harlem Neighborhood Plan asks for public sites to provide 100% affordable housing on public sites, deep affordability using HPD's ELA program, permanent affordability using MIH, which this does, open space, community facilities, housing for the homeless. It also asks for R8 zoning off the avenues to maximize the units, and this is an R8 zone rezoning. The beacon, I don't know how it could become closer to what was outlined in the plan and what was the work done by this committee in 2018. It also needs to be acknowledged, this reflects follow through by DCP, HPD, and the city of New York, right? There were commitments made in that rezoning. They were outlined in the points of agreement. And, we can say, the sanitation garage was a commitment hasn't been kept. But, this is one of the commitments that has been kept. This is site one. And if you look at what they said they were gonna do and what they are doing, it's happening. And, this sort of thing just, the community can come up with all the ideas it wants, but if it's not implemented by government, if you don't get buy-in from the city and say, all right, you develop this partnership, it's never gonna happen. And that's what happened here, is that you got the partnership with DCP, HPD and the city. And, HPD developed the East Harlem Housing Plan that continues to support affordable housing development in East Harlem. Now, let me just say, before I go too positive here, there are still details, right? There are details, Vinnie, you talked about, issues of local hiring, MWBE participation, project ownership, unit mix, open space design, Beverly, I think you were talking about. And then the existing tenant relocation and accommodations, like all of those things are important and they matter, but like big picture land use in the main, this reflects the project that the board asked for.
Yep.
And the city committed to, and, I've been sitting with you all for a number of years, and it's like beautiful as a planner to see something come out the end of the pipe. Now, I know there's no building yet, but there will be. This is the step that will have it come out the end of the pipe. So I was very happy to put this together, because you don't always, doesn't always end up this way.
Thank you, George.
Sorry, I almost hit you again. Do we have questions for George?
So, George, thank you for that presentation. It doesn't state in the, in the points of agreement, it talks about the relocation for the tenants.
Yeah.
It doesn't seem that that's really been honed in on by the current ownership, so. And some of these other good points that you mentioned, that without a doubt, this project definitely is something that's.
So if I may on
Go
that,
ahead.
just, so this is gonna go through ULURP and then it's gotta be closed on, it's gotta get financing. And when that happens, they do it like twice a year. When that happens is kind of open and you're kind of beholden to HPD's schedule, right? And it could be, it's not this time and it's 6 months from now. And so when you're developing relocation plans for somebody, it's hard to like ache those relocation plans until you know when you're gonna need to move people, right? And so I understand that why it hasn't been, finalized yet, because they don't know when they're moving them out. They have goals, but those goals could go away when HPD doesn't come through with financing.
That's true.
Right? You understand that.
Yeah, because we did that with Mary 411 and they decided to stay here.
Yeah,
So we relocated them from their old, where they were at,
yeah,
to then do the building, then bring them back in a more, space,
right.
office space, but then DC, the DCAS decided, no, we can't afford to move and all this kind of stuff, they stood here. But we already were, even though there's a plan in place, we're gonna get funded at some point, and I'm sorry if I'm out of order, that I'm not recognized.
Oh, no, please, you recognize that.
I'm sorry. So what happens is that you still have to have a plan in place.
Yeah,
Because once they said, okay, we got the money, let's start going, they're not gonna start like, oh, now we gotta start looking for a place. They
Yeah.
already gotta have at least identified.
yeah.
This is where we're going to move everyone, and everyone has to be in agreement too. So these conversations, I hope they're being done with, the current tenants that are in there. Like it should be like, if it's not happening, it should be happening as of yesterday.
Well, Nilsa may be able to comment on that.
Yeah, But
But
I think that that's only fair and right, because at the end of the day, if they're not gonna agree with where they're going, this project is not going anywhere until they all in agreement.
You're right, and
So they should be
here's the
talking
thing.
about that now.
I think there's a role for the community board, if you're for it, to play as like, an advocate for the tenants, right? It's, you have access to people in government that they don't, right? And you can possibly make their lives easier, be their voice for them, so.
Well, but I'm sure they have enough space to.
So I think Chair, something to say to that.
So,
Some answers to some of the concerns. So yeah, most importantly, last meeting, Nosa definitely spoke towards her active role as the director, and as you will see tonight, she will be present, not voting because of those concerns.
Right.
She will not voice any concerns as it relates to the CBOs that are on site. And second point for procedure, as discussed at executive last month, there was a common interest to begin the cross collaboration process, right? So as some of you are aware, we had some challenges with leadership at the executive level. Those adjustments have been made since. Some of you who may or may not be aware, the housing chair sits on this committee. And because of that, that allows a lot of cross collaboration with what's called the tenant protection plan.
Okay,
Right, so those of us that may not be familiar with buildings and construction, I need not tell you, the Department of Buildings won't issue a demolition permit to the contractor without them providing a tenant occupancy protection plan. And that is public information. We have opportunities to continue that discussion. To the second point for the MWB participation, which was a big concern, HPD is gonna talk a little bit about wages as it relates to the workforce. But again, the interest of other chairs on the board as it relates to land use actions, because I have voiced ad nauseum the concern of, for lack of a better word, other committee discussions happening within this committee that's preventing us from doing our work, which is land use, landmarks and preservation. So to some of these concerns as it relates to CBOs, housing, economic development, as I'm expressing it, you hear it, right?
right.
It's gonna be pushed to that committee so that they could do the follow through. And if that becomes a problem, then land use will respond, because we're the ones that are issuing the resolution that the board is gonna ratify. And the final point, I don't know if there's some of us who are newer and welcome, I don't know if they welcome to do for some of you that may not be familiar as well with process, HPD hasn't missed a meeting
That's right.
in over 2 years.
Yeah.
Right?
That's
So I want to emphasize that point. Our partner is the city agency, has been expressed from George James and other professionals that have been on this board a lot longer standing than I am. I emphasize that point because HPD has been that partner and acts in advocating our concerns. And should we have those questions, I don't think, even as of today, I emailed HPD at 6 o'clock about questions that were verbally stated last month. We never received anything from the members in writing, and they're prepared to respond as soon as we're done with this discussion. So, may not provide a sense of security, but I believe in trust where it starts with yourself. So I believe that, you know, HPD is taking into account our concerns. And with that said, I'll turn it back to Phil.
I'm done.
That's okay.
This is
Jessica,
all-
and then Jessica Morris.
Yeah, thank you, George, for this presentation. I think it reiterates all the things that we've been talking about, the impact of the committee and the community board's work on the outcome of the project. I think I mentioned this last month, but it's very, very difficult to provide deeper levels of affordability and more bedroom counts, 3 bedrooms, which is what we asked for. And, you know, I think what we heard last month from HPD and from the applicant about working with the tenants, working with us as a board, I think to George's point, they've done everything that we've asked and more. So I'm happy to hear the responses to the questions from HPD, but I think the resolution is great and I don't have any questions and would be willing to make a motion when it's available.
Jessica Morris.
Thank you. Just a sort of general, question. I know in our best practice, as a board, after we move forward on a resolution, work is not done necessarily. And, Stephen, when he, was doing his chairship prior to, Jason, those would be on waivers, as it shows.
Point of clarification, Elsie was the chair.
Briefly.
The Lubasti.
Yes, he had a rolling action item list, which was, a measure of following up, whether it was quarterly or monthly, just to check on projects. And so I would imagine that this, Beacon project would land on something like that, should it, be a tool, to make sure that we are, if not asking HPD or any of the development team to come back, and give us an update, just checking in with them regularly to,
confirm progress. So, I hope that continues. And then I did put forward a couple of additional points in writing, to Angel after the public hearing, and I was advised to bring those comments to land use to, engage in conversations with the development team. So, I'll put them forward again. To the land use, if they were not received, so we can make modified.
Thank you. Additional questions for George? Probably go
For
ahead.
point of clarification, Chair, all projects are on the air table on our website. So if anybody wants to see the status of projects that we voted on prior to my chairmanship, during or after, it is available as public information.
Thank you, Chair. Any additional questions for George?
Someone has to push their hands raised online. I don't know if you want to acknowledge them. They participate.
Member of the public?
Yeah, member.
Sure, yeah, we'll represent the, yeah, well,
Sure. Hold on a minute.
yes.
Jose Trucios.
He's from DCP.
DCP? Oh.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't see.
Hey, Khalid, before me, I sent you a list of names that they want to be panelists.
Yes, four individuals, Jose was
Okay.
one of them. Everybody else I have added.
Excellent.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Jose.
Sorry, Jose.
You're important, Jose.
Sorry.
Let me just double check those names, but I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I don't think Jose.
There are no hands raised.
Oh,
Okay, okay.
I didn't have anything to say. I just wanted to join as a panelist. Thanks.
Thank you. Now, I believe we'll hear from, we'll have folks, I think members from the community builders, ascendants, and HPD, they're available to answer any questions, is that correct?
Yes, we have with us Chris Cirillo, we have James Shekov, I hope I'm saying that correctly, Jose, Melissa Otten, and Brian Backscheider. They're available.
Perfect, may they be recognized as panelists?
They're already up.
Oh, they were,
on stage, yes.
okay.
They're,
If we,
Please go ahead, Chair.
Melissa, if you don't mind, could you read out the questions that were taught from verbal communication between land use, the full board and the public session, and then possibly answer them, which are the ones you sent to me in writing today?
Sure, just give me 1 second while I pull the exact language that I sent you up. And by the way, hi everyone, Melissa Otten, Director of Manhattan Planning at HPD. Good to see you. Thank you for having us again. So one of the questions that I'll start with the first one that I sent. One of the questions that came up over the past month is for us to clarify kind of the future ownership of the site and how affordability will be maintained over time. So first of all, this is the project was designated to a joint venture between the community builders and Ascendant nonprofit groups, developers, and Ascendant is a community-based developer in East Harlem. But more importantly, I kind of wanted to talk about how the long-term affordability and maintenance of this project, how we will ensure that. So, upon closing, HPD and the project sponsor will sign a regulatory agreement, which actually I'll let James jump in and talk about the regulatory agreement, if you would like, James.
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. James Chekov here again from HPD, senior planner for the Manhattan team. So our projects, so upon closing, like Melissa says, the sponsor and HPD will sign a regulatory agreement that kind of outlines the terms for that affordability and other, regulatory mechanisms. For this project, since it's on a public site, that regulatory agreement will be for, I believe, a 60-year minimum period. And in addition to the regulatory period, there is a sort of this like deed restriction, if you can call it that, which is, and it's a little complex, but it's called an extended affordability reverter clause in that agreement. And this RFP for the beacon was actually one of the first to include that clause. And so part of the agreement will be essentially it stipulates that if the owners do not come together to agree to an additional term of affordability at the end of the 60-year period, then the city at that time has the right to reclaim the title of the property and its improvements on the land. So it's not automatic, but it gives the city the right to do that after the end of the 60-year period. And that is something that is on newer affordable projects. I do believe that's like a de Blasio era policy. So it's not necessarily on legacy projects. So in case you have questions later on about some preservation deals or yeah, so.
Yeah, so this is one, I think for this community board, this will be one of the earlier projects where we are going to have that at the time of closing, and that will be a clause and part of the closing agreement. I also talked to my finance team and they wanted to add that this project will have an MIH requirement. So that's 30% of the units will be permanently affordable to an average of 80% AMI. That's in perpetuity. That requirement runs with the land. So that is another like extension of that affordability. So basically with all these things, we're kind of ensuring that, you know, the project as proposed will stay at the affordability levels proposed, or at least affordable for a very, very, very long time, essentially forever.
And and one other point there is because I know sometimes our various policies get intertwined, but this project, once it's live on Housing Connect, is governed by the rent stabilization guidelines board. So any rent increases are governed the way rent stabilized apartments are governed. Rent guidelines board, sorry. Yeah.
Right. So the next question, and I'm just listing these off since Jason talked about this. Sorry, are there additional questions?
Oh, no, not like that.
Later.
There will be some later, yes.
Okay, great. So we got questions about what will wages be for construction workers. I think, you know, let's go ahead and just talk about, there's a couple of topics that I can cover there, but you know, there will be a minimum 30% local hiring and WVE requirement for the project. So, and then also all permanent employees are subject to prevailing wage. However, construction workers are not, you know, required at prevailing wages, but I think I might give the development team a opportunity to speak further on this, just to.
Sure, I can jump in. Hello again, I'm Brian Backscheider from the Community Builders. Yeah, as Melissa said, the permanent employees once the building's really operating, the full-time employees will be prevailing wage employees, but during construction, there's always this balance, especially on affordable projects, of keeping costs down and still providing strong wages. So this is an open shop job. So we are anticipating with a project of this scale that will have a pretty healthy group of subcontractors bidding for the project, both union and non-union shops. The union shops on projects of this scale are actually pretty competitive usually, because the non-union shops that are working on this big of a building and this complex of a building like need to really know what they're doing, so they have really skilled employees that require that get paid good wages. And so we've seen, we talked with our general contractor, and he said on projects this size, he's seen and awarded union bids to MEP, to structure, to carpentry, so we think that there's, we certainly think that they're going to be competitive, and it's possible that we will have some union trades, but it is an open shop job to try to, maintain the costs.
I guess, there's one more, so we'll do I'm sure you all have some follow-up questions, but we got one more, that I believe we were asked, last time we came around, about clarity on the, set aside for homeless households, coming from shelter facilities and what services will be provided. So just wanted to, just to provide additional clarity there. So on all projects, all projects that are receiving city financial assistance due to local law 19 of 2020, there is a requirement that 15% of those units are set aside for homeless individuals and families. And so, in this case, the developer is working with HPD proposing units through a program called Our Space, which includes light touch services for those individuals to stably and successfully transition into permanent housing and maintain their tenancy. And so those services can include things like eviction prevention, voucher assistance, benefits enrollment, etc. And these are individuals that HPD kind of identifies in the shelter system that are housing ready. Maybe they're temporarily in homeless shelter facilities, etc., or even chronically, but they're ready to move into permanent housing. It's sort of identified by HPD working with DHS and other service agencies. And so there's this sort of qualified, list of individuals, and then also the developer gets to use a qualified list of service providers for these services, but they are light touch services to ensure that successful transition. And that'll be 15% of units on this project, which I'm forgetting the exact number off the top of my head, but I believe 42 or so, 43. There we go.
So I think those are the, please go ahead.
I was just going to add that the folks that, the formerly homeless set aside are meant for are folks that are housing ready. They are households that would, typically be housed in other communities. It's just that New York City is really expensive. So again, it's housing ready households, and the light touch services, as James said, are supposed to help with the transition into the permanent housing.
Thank you for that clarification, Melissa. So I think those are the pre-submitted questions. I'll now open the floor for folks who have questions beyond those 3 questions that were already asked. Go ahead, Beverly Pavona, so you can give it in person.
Okay, thank you guys for the presentation. In regards to, you said that these units will also be rent stabilized under the rent stabilization. Each year that goes up, they have a meeting every year to see how much it goes up. Regardless of what that goes up, would these units still stay affordable under the 80% AMI? Is there any chance that with the rent guideline board would go higher than that they would make them, even higher, the units and how much they cost now?
So these units, the affordability is going to be stipulated in the regulatory agreement. So although they're rent regulated, they would still be affordable at the AMIs. I believe that, are stipulated at the time of closing. And I believe, I'll have to get back to you. I can respond on this. I believe there's very rare situations where those rents are adjusted. And I'm not the finance folks, so I don't know the process for that, but I could get back to you on that.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Kim.
Hi,
Thank you for the, presentation. My question is, because they're joint ventures, who's gonna actually be on the deed of the land when it all gets transferred? Is it gonna be a joint venture or who's actually holding the deed?
Ownership.
Yes,
Yes.
so, oh,
Land.
I can jump in. Yeah, so when the property is transferred, it will be to what we call a single purpose entity, as or sort of an entity that is created for this project, and that entity will be controlled by the community builders and descendant. So we'll be the or operators of the entity that owns the building.
I'm talking about the land, the deed. It's gonna be on the
Yes.
community builders and ascended or,
Yeah, it will be, yes, the deed will be with a entity that is controlled by the community builders and descendant.
and you're not answering my question.
Yeah, I have a follow-up to that. Sorry, to interrupt. This is just a legal matter. I know you're creating an LLC of some sort, right? A single purpose entity, but what is the governance structure there? Can you tell us how that works?
Yeah.
Like what does the control look like for that?
Like who's 50-50 or, like, if let's say, God forbid, something happens to Ascendant, right? Cause Christopher Riddle won't be there, but the organization will be there, or if not. And then, or your organization, what's gonna happen should anybody not exist, but who's gonna be the responsible person? That the city's gonna hold accountable as well as the community board members, because we're here today, but we just wanna make sure for the record. Who is going to be on that deed that says that this land now is being dispossessed? HPD is turning it over to XYZ. Is it gonna be just Ascendant and community builders? Or Ascendant as a community organization to East Harlem? Not the LLC,
Just let him answer the question.
but just that, I know what I'm
I know.
asking.
That's what I did.
Said it like
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know if anyone else wants to try to jump in. I'm not sure how else to answer the question. I'm not trying to avoid answering the question. I'm just not sure how to answer it for you.
Yeah, I think put another way, can you clarify what the governance structure looks like? It's a question I think we asked at the previous meeting, and we don't know to what extent who has more control or what control over the future of the project.
And the land,
Oh,
and the land on that, where that project is.
Yeah, the land and the building, as with all affordable housing projects, the land and the building will be owned by an entity, basically an entity called a Housing Development Fund Corporation. And the Housing Development Fund Corporation is controlled jointly by Ascendant and the community builders. So the whole project, the land that it's built on and the building that's built there and the rehabbed multi-service center are all going to be owned by the same single purpose entity, a Housing Development Fund Corporation, that's controlled jointly by Ascendant and the community builders. And both joint venture partners, as in most joint ventures, have decision-making power shared between them about what happens, how the project is built, how it's operated. So it's sort of the same basic structure that any joint venture would have.
So I apologize, I misspoke. So it's an HDFC, so is that a 50-50 split then, the HDFC between the two parties?
No, for this deal, I'm not really sure the relevance of the percentages, but I think we addressed this back when we were first designated. The deal that we have with the community builders is that they have a 90% interest in the project and Ascendant has a 10% interest.
Thank you.
they should have just shared that.
Okay, are there any additional questions from committee members, including those online?
There are members of the public who have their hand.
Oh,
That's what you're going bottom line.
Beverly, so you have a question?
Yeah, my last question is regarding, community preference. Do you know at what stage, because I know it's gonna change, and you haven't closed yet, can y'all lock in what the percentage of community preference is now? Where we have a higher percentage than, maybe down the line it'd be less? Is that something that y'all can do now, so you can have more percentage of community preference? For these units?
So the community preference is, governed by the community preference rules for the city. And it's gonna be dependent on when this goes into marketing. So right now, the community preference is 20%. And then in April, is it 2029, James? April
2029, yeah.
It will be 15%. So it depends on when this is marketed out. If it's prior to April 2029, then it'll be at 20%. If it's after, it's 15%. And unfortunately, there isn't really anything we can do to change that as HPD. But we do still have community preference is the good news.
And I have a quick point of clarification. I think there's a court order, there's a settlement in April, and so they're going to have much control over that. It's pursuant to the settlement and what the city agreed to. Great. So I think we'll move on to questions from the public. Please, if this is
There was one person.
there's one person, okay, I'll recognize that speaker person.
Kira Jerez Alston.
Hi, hello. So I just have one question. In y'all's negotiations over these properties and developments, is there a percentage between 15 and 30% that is prioritizes East Harlem's foundational and historical residents? Because I think it's very kind and very sweet to set aside affordable housing units, right? Or for people experiencing homelessness. But the reality is a majority of the people that are in the shelters in East Harlem right now are not even foundational members of the neighborhood. And there's a large community, a demographic, couple generations of East Harlem natives who have more than, for example, my family has more than 100 years in this neighborhood who can't even really afford to live here, and then also don't qualify for the amassment of affordable housing properties that are coming up. So in these discussions, are y'all like negotiating or asking for some level of priority for East Harlem's historical and foundational residents with more than 5 to 10 years here?
So I can jump in here. Thank you for that question. So I think it kind of builds on the discussion we just had, which is that this project will have either a 15 or a 20% preference for community board residents. So that is East Harlem community board residents. If the project comes live before April 2029, it will be 20% preference. After April 2029, it'll be a 15% preference. The preference was prior to this year was higher, but there was a court order that brought that down. We used to go higher than 20% for community residents because we understand, the need to prevent displacement in the community and ensure that folks can be in, stable housing long-term in the communities they grew up in. So I think from HPD's perspective, we're continuing to fight to create as much housing as possible so folks can remain in their neighborhoods. We are happy that there is still a community preference allowed because it was actually at risk of being struck down entirely. So so it will be between 15 and 20% depending on when the project opens, is marketed.
Thank you, but that's actually kind of ridiculous that that would be something that would be at risk. I think it should be. I thank you guys for everything that you're doing to fight for 30%, but if we're being quite honest, it should be so much more.
Thank you for your comments. I would love to continue the conversation with you as to what resulted into these challenges, because we all have the same passion, especially our housing committee that advocates for these challenges. But if I don't hear anything that is necessarily challenging, we could continue that conversation at a later date. It'd be great because there's some legislative concern with the community preference.
Yes.
And unfortunately, it was spearheaded more by the minority than anybody, right? So I think that we need to have that conversation to understand where it lies today, where it's hurting us in our communities as minorities within the minority community. But the challenge in the case, from what I understand, was a minority arguing against a majority community. And it was deemed that the preference is considered, for lack of a better term, racist and or discriminatory.
I muted the person, by the way.
Oh, yeah, I think that's perfect. And yeah, we can continue that discussion. In other avenues or another committee, without getting too much into the details of that lawsuit. Are there any other questions for our guests tonight? Otherwise, I'll entertain a resolution or motion. Oh, please go ahead.
Sorry, I know we've sort of aimed to call it put something, but I think it's put something delivered on this one, right? I just wanna, Wagner Walk already exists. I know that's a part of the project. So Wagner Walk exists along East River Esplanade.
Wagner Walk, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So,
We talked about this last week or last month. Bobby Wagner Walk.
Wagner Walk is a part of their project, so I think there may be some confusion in that. I also just wanted to bring up, while the project is still a bit far out, has there been or could there be consideration for a small performance space, i.e. a stage, to be included in the amenities of the beacon, i.e. where the auditorium will be lost in the overall reuse, like some form of flexible space up where the basketball court may be. But not everybody plays basketball, however, there will be a loss of well-used performance space. So something to put forward to the architectural team while things are still in planning mode. Thank you.
And I literally brought up the same point last month, so that's really funny. Be Wagner Walk.
Okay, any additional questions? Otherwise, I will entertain a motion for a project. Please go ahead.
Motion to provide. Motion to approve land use application C 240-385 MMM, C 240-386 ZMM, C 240-387 PAM, C 240-388 ZRM, the Beacon Mixed Use Development Process with the following conditions.
Yeah.
One, the developer commits to CB11's local hiring preference guidelines, which sets local hiring targets of 35% for pre-construction jobs, 35% for construction jobs, 50% for post-construction hiring for residents of CB11, and 35% of the total value of all contracts being awarded to the businesses located in CB11. Two, the developer commit to proactively establish partnerships with local workforce development organizations to source qualified residents of CD11 for employment opportunities created by all phases of the proposed development.
Thanks.
Thank you. I have a second. Oh, somebody second. Okay, go ahead. Vinny, I'm going first.
I'll second that.
Perfect. Coolidge, do we
do a roll call?
Yeah, shall we do a roll? Do you need another motion? Okay.
I'll get a second.
Perfect. Okay, yeah. Shall we do a roll call vote on that one?
Do you want to do it by acclamation or by vote? By roll call.
Okay, all in favor? Any opposed?
This is different.
Accuracy in our resolution.
Is there accuracy?
Yeah. December 26th.
Well, these are your detailed, affordable housing development guidelines. That's not this project.
Okay.
Oh, that's just the guideline.
That's just your guidelines. It's not this project. This goes much deeper than the guidelines.
Thank you.
Good.
It'll be good. Yes. Cause I'm like, wait a minute.
Yeah. Well, I believe we've already had the.
Should we call the motion just to
Give us a.
Yeah.
Sure,
there was a little
just
confusion
to
there.
clear the record. Okay,
Yes.
all those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Hello, this is Nilsa. I am totally confused as to what you all are doing. Could you please explain what this motion is about?
So I think let's start from the very beginning. I think we had a motion on the floor that was seconded, but we can start the process again just to
Yes.
make sure that we're all on the same page, literally, figuratively. well, what we're agreeing to. So, once again, I'll ask, are there any motions on the floor concerning the, project we just discussed? Jessica?
What do you mean by that? The project, are we voting on the project? Are we voting on the resolution? If there are any additions? What exactly are we voting on in terms of this project? Because we've heard about this project for about a year and a half, so I'm a little confused as to what we're doing.
No, so we are following our standard practice with the presentation and the resolution. The only addition that was made as it relates to the resolution is encompassing economic developments, hiring practices and guidelines.
So is that what we're voting on? Are we voting on the resolution?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's what I wanted to get clear.
Thank you, Nelson. Any additional questions or clarification before we continue? Okay, seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. I think Jessica saw your hand up, so.
Motion to approve the recommendation on land use application C 240385 C 240386 ZMM, C 240387 HAM, C 240388 ZRM, the Beacon Mixed Use Development Project with the following conditions. 1, the developer commits to CB11's local hiring preference guidelines, which set local hiring targets of 35% for pre-construction jobs, 35% for construction jobs, 50% for post-construction hiring for residents of CB11, and 35% of the total value of all contracts being awarded to businesses located in CB11. 2, the developer commit to proactively establish partnerships with local workforce development organizations to source qualified residents of CB11 for employment opportunities created by all phases of the proposed development.
Thank you. It's Jason, sorry, hand, is that second? Okay, we'll vote all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Oh, okay, any, present not voting?
This is no, I'm present not voting because I have a conflict.
Thank you, Nosa. Okay, I believe the motion passes.
Congratulations.
Congrats, committee.
All right, we did it. Thank you.
We have to see the forest of the trees.
All right, so let's move right along.
That's their
Okay,
thing.
thank you all. Have a good night. And we'll
And
see you
thank
at
you,
full
Jess.
board. We'll be there at full board in a couple weeks.
Thank you so much for all your help today. We appreciate it. Okay, so moving right along, let's go to agenda item B. We'll discuss and finalize committee goals for the 2024-2025 meeting session.
That's what's happening here though.
I will read out some of the things we talked about last month.
I think any of that.
And I believe these are mostly items we've had on our, I don't want to call it tracker, but any place that term, but basically we've had it on our radar for quite a while.
Thank you, George.
Just summarizing very quickly. Thank you again. So the first item we had last month was more housing for special needs populations. So for example, formerly homeless folks. Any questions or comments or further discussion about that?
I'm sorry, are we doing goals or budget?
I've been reading the budget. I'm so sorry.
Wow.
Wait, are you sure discussion finalized committee goals? for
It's
2024?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so sorry. I was actually reading the budget section. I'm so sorry, folks. Let's take a step back.
And I put the minutes for your last month's meeting. They're in the board drive now.
Thank you.
Take a look at them and
Thank you, Khalid. Yes, so folks, meetings, minutes are finally available online in the G drive. Okay, here we go. So in terms of goals, okay, yes. So one item we talked about, kind of loosely or briefly, was orienting our committee towards landmarks and preservation. So identifying buildings, places, structures, parts of the community that we want to preserve for future generations. Whether that's achieving landmark status or highlighting or putting on register, but making sure that we highlight those places and spaces. So do we have any additional feedback or questions or discussions about that as a committee goal moving forward? Go ahead, Jessica.
How, it's great to say, how are we going to do that? And I asked, because Kano Towers came on my radar as a long-standing, incredibly iconic, set of buildings in our neighborhood that doesn't fall under the stylistic type of classical architecture, but is a culturally rich, architecturally rich place. You know, in the form of presentations, how is this work going to happen would be my question, not to necessarily answer now, but to perhaps consider as we uphold that goal going forward. Thank you.
I think it's great. Thank you. Moving right along, another theme that we talked about was the kind of persistent problem of landlord warehousing. So we have a lot of properties in our district, in our community that are vacant, that are just sitting empty, that aren't being used for sorely needed housing. And I guess the question is, how do we want to formulate that into a more concrete goal? How do we want to address warehousing, vacant properties? Do you have any thoughts on a game plan or a way to incorporate this into the work of the committee for the next year?
I would just note that we brought it up to both council members at our district needs and budget consultation meetings, so they are aware of our concern in this area. Yeah, and then I'm personally also bringing it up in the other organizations that I'm involved with in the city as like a global problem, but I know it's more specific to our neighborhood, but within the committee, I think we can reach out to city agencies, set up calls to discuss this specifically and bring that work back to this committee for discussion.
Perfect, thank you. All right, Ms. Slater. Oh, go ahead, Beverly, then we'll switch to Jason and Derek.
Jessica, did that also include housing, warehousing for, that's owned by city agencies, like HPD also, or just private?
We mainly talked about the private, but I think we've been talking at length based on the points of agreements, the city-owned properties that have been slated for affordable housing, that, you know, some other things need to be cleared up before land can be utilized in that way, so that is an ongoing conversation. Did that answer your question?
And there's an effort, Chair, to add this to our statement of district needs this cycle with that's the intention, right? To have that conversation with city agencies, starting with HPD and then working our way across to get up to the mayor's office so that some form of an executive order or an action at the legislative level can happen for these as of right projects, properties that exist that are being underutilized.
Perfect, that makes sense, thank you. Or Derek and then Jessica.
So, right, through our partners with like HPD, like what is already out there as mechanisms for addressing this, like leading with that more. And something else that was put out there or like the concept of like a vacancy tax, right? So like what needs to be studied and learned, and then the legislative process to make something like that happen. And so having this committee, you know, apply pressure to do that learning, studies, and sort of the next steps there, because it will obviously be like a probably multi-year type of thing. So starting that.
That's really helpful, and I'm writing some of this down, but I hope we can collectively come together and kind of pull what we talked about today in terms of next steps and going forward. I think that's a really good idea in terms of formalizing there.
Just wanted to, did Angel by any chance ask you guys to finalize these goals by this month?
The goals are not a formal process. We're not, when you say finalize, I think vote, we're not voting on it. It's a practice for ourselves to hold us.
Okay.
So the points of agreement, the statement of district need measures that practice.
Right.
But that's been our performance for the last 4 years.
Okay, just want to clarify only because, you know, on this, in the staff version, or staff side, yes, that we asked the committees to make sure that all votes were finalized by their October meetings. If he did something different with you all, then of course, but I just wanted to clarify and make sure.
You're asking us to finalize our goals?
I'm wondering if you had to finalize and agree on, that's what I'm wondering.
Finalized, okay, I'm chair.
Go ahead.
Okay,
The answer is no.
alrighty then.
Just, yeah, some committees don't even look at this until January.
It's more, we're gonna be consistent because there are some, though we're talking openly, there are some items that have been on our list for years.
Okay.
Right, like Jessica Morris just threw ECF to me, right? There's a lot of concerns that we have
Sorry.
from things that we voted on, but the driver is gonna be our district needs and the points of agreement. We need to hold ourselves accountable to what this board presented and voted on before we start addressing and concerning ourselves outside of this committee, let alone the board. And I'll present in that same fashion to the board.
Alright, no problem.
But thank you for your concern.
Just wanted to know. That's it.
Go ahead, Jessica Morris.
Sorry for the end of the month.
No. But we're supposed to do that for all of our other committees, so I just wanted to know so I can make it in my notes, that's all.
We can always do it next month.
On the warehousing front, some actual data for our district, that would be helpful foundationally, right? I know it's very difficult data to find, but I think the quantifying the potential or quantifying the problem and how it relates to preserving affordable housing will start to point to some of those policy solutions, I think, hope. So I don't know how, so data as it relates to quantity.
That's a great point, Jessica. I think that's actually already incorporated in our expense budget priorities, providing a study of the catalog of existing vacant lots. So I think that's a fantastic point, and we'll make sure we finalize that.
Not vacant lots, warehousing.
Oh, warehousing, so a landowner owning a property and just sitting on the units.
Right. That are
That's-
affordable.
I think that, right, as opposed to,
Rent-stabilized units that are not being rehabbed, that are not habitable, because they are not fixing them and haven't for decades.
And
But lots of them.
then that's something we can incorporate into our district need.
There?
Yeah, that's a really good point.
Great.
Yeah, well, even if it's not there to, our understanding and satisfaction, we can discuss how to, change the language if need. Does that make sense? Would that be helpful?
Sure, it's there.
Okay, I just want to make sure.
Thank you.
I just wanted to add that, we also talked about, we can sometimes get a planning fellow. And that if we do get another planning fellow, that perhaps one of the tasks they could work on is building that data so that we can use that data in future resolutions and things such as that.
Thank you both, Jessica.
Let's see, punch.
All right, and
Our
I
minds are on the same track.
And very quickly, just two final items, I think, we discussed how to better engage with institutional partners, for example, New York City Health and Hospitals and other large actors that are in our district. And kind of in conjunction with that, educating ourselves about the new 421A, 485X now. So basically the new funding structures that allow affordable housing to be constructed here. Any additional questions or discussions? Go ahead, Chair.
Yeah, just a comment to edify the committee. So there is a discussion again at executive where there are active cabs, right? Which are, and for those of us that may not be familiar, they're community advisory boards, which our board has the opportunity to appoint to these institutions. Why do I say that? Some people are on the cabs, most people are not, right? So that's something where leadership has to get more engaged in guiding us chairs, that if there are cabs that affect land use, that I have the opportunity to appoint a committee member, right? And that will alleviate, I always loved Mills' term when she was chair, the silo concerns that unfortunately they're not real, right? I have to say it that way. There are concerns, there are relevancies, but there are a lot of conspiracies. So we have to have a little bit of faith in the process because that's why we're here, or should I say that's why I'm here? I'm a volunteer, right? And I am applying myself with the intention of creating a procedure that allows us to have this type of collaboration. So some of the institutions I found it interesting that have been brought up at land use, when I brought it up at executive and had further conversations, we're not appointing members and or members are appointed and they're not reporting back. Right? So if you're appointed to a CAB, it is your duty to bring your minutes. It's not personal information, it's not closed door information, it's public information, right? They fall under the same FOIL Act as we do, right? And that being said, since they're claiming that, we should have the opportunity to possibly use that information to the better interest of some of our positions for the future, right? But again, it's a tactic, it's nothing I said is law, it's an option.
Thank you, Chair. Go ahead, Joe.
So, if you don't know, I'm actually chair of Metropolitan Hospitals CAB. And two of us from CB11 serve on the CAB. I am the chair, but Carlos Diaz is the CB rep for this board. So when we have meetings, Carlos Diaz is the one that brings information from the CAB here and vice versa. So it's the point of clarification. So we are the two members at the Metropolitan CAB.
They don't mind me answering, Jim, because I'm not too familiar with the process, right? I speak from the position of vulnerability. I don't think that takes away that if I'm chair of this committee and I cross collaborate with the chair from the CAB to obtain information that assists constituents, don't think that's necessarily something that, and why I say that, because there are other CABs where we just don't have any representation, right? So I still think that there is opportunity for chairs to step up in their leadership role, or vice chairs to step up in their leadership role, and continue that cross collaboration.
Well, yeah, so to say that, I say that I'm here, I'm, happy to speak on behalf of the CAB, of the hospitals. So, yeah, I'm just offering my assistance and information as best I can, even though policy is the rep, but I'm happy to.
Thank you.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you. I have your name written down, so.
Or, yeah, over there, et cetera.
Perfect. So we'll make sure that that is institutionalized for our committee at least, that we know you're a point person for us for those issues. You know, well, everyone, you, Carlos, everyone else is on the catch. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Go ahead.
And regards to that, do we have access to their meetings or minutes? So we go for a initial. They're online.
Well, first or different one. I know it conflicts with parks, that's why I just said down there. That's why.
Just, yeah.
Okay, go ahead, Jessica.
Wanted to add, I don't have visibility on who all sits on what CAGs, like, especially off the top of my mind. But I do know when we were discussing, committee appointments over the summer and like committee leadership in general, that CAGs were discussed and that, we should continue that conversation at executive as to where those CAGs should report back to, and a reminder of who sits on what CAGs. I think if I understand, Xavier is the one who appoints those people, and I don't know for sure, but I do know we have the listserv of, on our, like, I think on our attendance sheets of like, there is a CAG
Designation.
folder, or what are those called, tab, that shows who's on what CAG.
Yes.
CAG is Community Advisory Group.
There's two. I always confuse them.
They are the same thing.
They're the same thing.
And one more note on that is that we discussed the CAG for the sanitation garage conversations, and the council members are working to identify the members from all those different representatives who get to choose who is serving on that CAG, including us as CB11 who sits on that. So that's in progress, and about to be defined.
Okay, perfect. Thank you, Jessica.
Yeah.
And Candy,
I just want to make a comment that, I know everybody leadership changes. And so everyone does things differently. For community advisory boards, used to have whoever was appointed on those boards, and it was appointed by the chair. That individual at the full board would then give a report to everyone what's happening at that community advisory board of the health and hospitals. And that's the CAB. The CAG is something new that Jessica, you just enlightened me to. But,
I don't know what the difference
it's
is.
community, yeah, but the difference is the community advisory board, you're actually sitting on a board and you're discussing what's happening in that institution and how it affects the the residents as well as the patients in the hospital. And is a collaborative with working together also with administration. And so with listening to, there's public hearings that goes on, which we should be enlightened about that. But that comes from the Community Advisory Board. As Jules says, she wouldn't mind, she's the chair of Metropolitan Hospital, but we have other health and hospitals members that you have Henry J. Carter. We used to have Harlem Hospital. So it's within the purview of East Harlem and Community District 11.
Right.
And that's how that, you know, but like I said, every chair does things differently, and how we get information on what's happening to these institutions and the Community Advisory Board representatives is up to, you know, how they want us to, the community board and full board and the public to know exactly what has transpired in those meetings.
Understood. Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, and I hope that it can continue, even though it was, you know, before, but like I said, it's all based on leadership.
And I'll definitely defer to the chair. We'll discuss how we can incorporate that into things going forward. Okay, one more point. Go ahead, Jessica.
Sorry, just point of clarification. Thank you, Jill, for joining the committee and for being part of things, but it's my understanding, Mount Sinai and also has a cab.
I'm part of
Kenny, I
that
think
cab.
you're part, yeah, and the reason I say that is because they're big footprint institutions in our neighborhood, back to the goal. And I know that Mount Sinai has come to our committee before and talked about public realm and partnering with NYCHA neighbors across the street. So making sure that not only our public hospital cab, but also our private hospital cab are actively engaged, because I think there are opportunities as far as land use is concerned, and ways to improve quality of life around those institutions, including access and community givebacks that support healthy activities, and along with understanding that there are housing programs that happen through various entities that have land to build on. So just Mount Sinai is also a cab to have on note, as far as land use should be aware of.
But, on what I know,
Go ahead, Ken. I'll
the
let you
chair,
go.
I'm sorry,
We're speaking loud, but go ahead.
I'm sorry.
I'll let you go, please.
the chair does not appoint anybody into Mount Sinai. It's not part of Health and Hospital, you know, it's not a city. So.
It's a private institution.
It's
So
a
I'm gonna
private-
cut this conversation off. I do think it's a valuable conversation, and I think that we can work offline to kind of put together a list of the cabs in our community and the CAGs and how we want to interface with them and also be a part of them. So definitely, thanks again. That's really valuable. We'll make sure that we follow up on that. And I think with that, those are our committee goals. So we'll move right along to our discussion on district needs and budget requests for the fiscal year 2026, and everyone should have a copy of it. Voting on, does everyone have one in front of them?
They have the copy, the sent to them without the last 2 weeks, we left it open till last night.
Thank you for the point for clarification, Chair. Okay, so now let's move through the items together. I'll start with capital budget priorities and requests. Item number 1. Provide more housing for special needs households such as the formerly homeless. Again, this is an item we've had in the past, and I think everyone had the explanation in front of them. I can read it out loud, though. I don't know what makes the most sense. I guess we'll just skip it. We'll read it out loud. Everyone has it in front of them or has reviewed it beforehand. Does the community have additional feedback or discussion before we move on to the next one? Okay, so hearing none. Oh, so sorry, Jessica.
I just wanted to note that the staff recommendation noted to keep, I personally agree with that. This is our first top priority for as long as I've ever been on the board.
I said it myself. Perfect. Okay, so we have notes keep. So hearing no dissent, we'll continue on to the next item. But again, folks, I welcome you to say something or raise your hand if there are additional items you want to add to, or any objections that you might have. So the second item is provide more housing for extremely low and low income households. And Beacon's a great example of that. So I think we have a sense of what that means for our community and what that means in terms of creating greater affordability. The staff recommendation here is keep. Any additional comments or questions about the second item? Okay, seeing none, right along, let's go to item number 3, provide more housing for seniors. Again, I think it's pretty self-explanatory. We've discussed this at length. This is new for HPD. But again, I think the need is clear, in addition to wanting to have a greater family household, we want to protect folks aging in place. I think this is a really important issue.
If I may, Chair,
Please go ahead.
just so that the committee members new and old understand, the reason we brought this up was because in our last 4 land use applications, this was a big outcry from members of the district, right? Where, example, given a particular project was up for land use, and the long and the short of it, there was more housing for people that had special needs, as opposed, or one project was special needs, the second project was homelessness. And in both projects, the outcry from the district was for seniors. For senior housing. And you hear the challenges with preference, right? It's gonna keep coming up, which is now it's going to be, for lack of a better word, discriminatory to advocate, right? So we have to find more technical and legislative measures to advocate for our constituents, along with the concerns that are relevant to this district. So that was the interest of putting that. I think we all agree, unless there's lines of different perception on the seniors.
Thank you for that, Chair. I couldn't possibly agree.
No.
Who is that person? All right, moving right along, we'll go now to expense budget priorities and requests. So the first item here is study land use and zoning to better match current use for future neighborhood needs. Go ahead, Sherry.
So yeah, and this is another one that we've outcried, our staff heard it, I've heard it, where there's a concern of, forgive me if I don't use all your terms, warehousing, we have to use legislative terms, right, legal terms. And if they consider a property, a residential property, or a commercial property vacant, it doesn't mean that the building isn't there. It's not about the land. The argument that we're having about warehousing is that there isn't any active, lively human beings in the space. I can get into the semantics of permanently controlled and environmental laws, but the reality is we're advocating and we're just putting HPD on notice. They've already heard it. They actually gave us some of the verbiage on recommendations, so that way we can actively engage and continue to work with them. Because as some of you may or may not be aware, this was a major issue during the City of Yes housing initiative, right? There was more concern about existing properties that were vacated as opposed to changing or restoring or renovating existing properties, which was a lot of this discussion of City of Yes, right? Turning commercial space to residential space, turning that illegal apartment in the basement to a legal apartment. All of those intentions were to create more housing, right? Now the concern, which is a housing committee argument, but I heard you, and I still put it in land use. And that, Dem hears us, and he has the same position for the housing committee. That being said, like all projects, it's gonna probably take 10 to 15 years to roll out, but we're starting the advocacy. And I need not say, I really, really would implore you to follow up, follow through, and us continue this conversation. I'm probably gonna have HPD come out and some of the other agencies that cross with land use the first quarter of the year to speak to us specifically about these requests, right? And that'll hold us accountable on both our goals as well as our statement of district needs, if that makes sense.
Happy to
The
help.
process.
It does, thank you.
District needs would be happy to help coordinate
Oh, yeah.
any other meetings outside of committee meetings as well.
Thank you, Jim. Great.
And I also want to let them know that when we just asking about data, HPD has a website called, COPA, city-owned land lease properties. And you can pinpoint what properties that they own in our community district. And it has a big list of, like zip code and community board area. So we can outline what build, like if you want to know specifically, what are you doing with this building here? That we know is there and it's been vacant for so many years and stuff, but we can get that listing from there.
Thank you, Beverly. That's COLP.
Yeah, COLP,
Yeah, we'll put that website in
yeah.
the minutes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Right, and so I believe, Chair, correct me if I'm wrong, we do have to vote on this.
100%.
Right, okay. So,
Oh, I'm sorry, and prioritization. You have to give prioritize,
High, medium, or low.
high, medium, and.
okay, so, okay, let's do that. So I think if we can get expense budget priorities out of the way, there's only one item there, so that's our priority. Moving to capital budget priorities.
But would we designate that a high?
Oh, yes, please.
I'll just keep it simple, given the district needs for housing has been the biggest outcry since I've been a board member, they're all high.
Mm-hmm.
So unless someone wants to counter that with some logical perception from our district needs that we've all voted on for the last 5 years, I think it's fairly simple, unless we have a different position.
Completely agree.
So all high.
All high.
Go ahead, Candy, sorry.
No, I just want a
I'm
motion to approve of the,
Wait, and before you do, I just want to clarify, so, your capital requests, you're voting to keep you're keeping the first two, and then you're adding the new for HPD, the third one, and you're designating all of them high priority. And you're also adopting the new expense request budget, budget request.
That's correct, thank you.
All right, perfect, thank you.
Yes, okay. Okay, so I'll entertain a
motion.
Candy.
So I motion to approve the capital budget priorities request and our expense budget priority request.
Thank you, Candy. Can I get a second? Thank you, Chair. I didn't give it to the chair, sorry. I will give it to you there. No, no. Okay,
Spread the
Sarah.
love.
I second them.
Sarah takes it, okay. All those, who do an acclamation again? All those in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Any present not voting? That wouldn't make sense. Okay, sounds like that passes and we finalize our district needs and budget requests. Okay.
This was the easy.
Hallelujah.
Any old business? Oh, so sorry. Okay, I don't need to, I just want to keep that. Go ahead, Jessica. You had to see their points.
I just wanted to check in with where we were at with regard to what was brought to the table in our last meeting, regarding, scenic landmark for Maggie's Magical Garden. Yeah, there was a little bit of back and forth, but is there a meeting set up or point of conversation?
Great point, Jessica. So there was not a meeting set up at this time, but I want to thank you for starting that conversation with Historic District Council, and hopefully we'll have one sometime in mid-October, I think is the goal.
We're there, it's mid-October.
I know, you're right. But I would suffice to say, I think the conversation has started, and the hope is that we'll proceed in meeting with the community partners, with the folks who run Magic Garden, with William Betancourt, who was the tenant association president, who lives nearby, who's also part of the process, and we'll keep the committee apprised of what happens. Okay, so that being said, is there any, oh, go ahead.
Derek, did you second?
Yes.
Yeah. And Kenny, do you have something you wanted to say?
I think I'll wait till I find out some information, then I'll just say.
Okay.
I'll bring it back.
Okay,
Just
Sure.
something from the past. In the past, you know, we supported other groups, like, for example, I've heard that St. Paul's School got closed, right? And so the park that is next to the garden, we supported the school to have access to that, you know, but also with the caveat that if they're not gonna exist or anything, that they return it right back to the community. And I think we need to find out exactly what's going on with that, you know, because at the end of the day, the purpose was to not have the children play in the street like they used to in the past. So that park would have given them access. There's an access from the school to the side door to get them to play in the park. Now, excuse me?
Is it a job? Joint operating playground?
Yeah, but it wasn't created that way before. I'm just saying
No, that is.
that if the school is no longer existing and that was the condition. So now I really don't know exactly what's happening with St. Paul's, the school.
So, and
You
can
know.
I ask you, can you send us an email or Jason and myself, because I do want to follow up on that, that could be an agenda item for next month, but I do want to make sure we focus on that, that's a good point, right? We don't want this land to be unproductively used, serving the community, I totally understand
It's
that. but-
empty, locked up, and not even the kids from the community be able to play, have access.
Can you send us an email tonight, or as soon as you can, and
Yeah,
then we can
'cause
follow
I'm
up with
gonna
that,
find-
and
yeah.
see how we can address that.
I'm not trying to take up everybody's
No,
time
no,
tonight, but I
I'm
just.
glad it's on our
It's
radar.
it's a good point, and just
St.
for
Paul's.
opening for all committee members, right? When you send your notes, I'm not ignoring you, their interest may get forwarded to another chair, right? Like that sounds like.
Like a
youth-
parks department, or even
That
youth
sounds like a youth,
and education.
an education committee challenge, right? But that doesn't take away from us notifying our fellow chairs, right?
Right, because it
As
came
well
through
as
land
like
use.
some of the efforts that members make with constituents in the district, right? This is a public forum. You have every right to act, becoming of a board member in the interest of within our bylaws. I actually CC to keep us in the loop, so then that way, let's be real, if something happens negatively in your sphere, the board is aware, or there's been a conversation as to that particular topic of discussion. But there are a lot of items that this committee has voted on for the last 20 years, I'm gonna be that extreme, that we don't follow up on.
Right.
So I don't want our meetings. Let me rephrase that, I would like our meetings to be productive, and if there's concerns of past actions, then that's something for us as board members, that we don't have to wait a whole month to have this conversation, or a gotcha, or you didn't say, or we didn't do. But I'll keep it as simple as this. If I failed, you failed. If you failed, we all failed. So as long as we continue to work together, which I think is exactly what's been happening in this committee, we'll address a lot of those concerns, and we'll start jumping over hurdles that necessarily this committee hasn't done in a few years, right? And that is my interest, is to see us successful, both in the table as well as outside of the office.
Because that vote came through the land use, that's why.
Yeah.
So I'm bringing it back here. But yes, I wanted to bring that up also at the youth and education and parks, because it's all in one, right? But as we change and shift the leadership, but just to let you know, there's a condition there.
Yeah, so
And
you're
the
gonna send
agreement.
an email after the meeting, right?
Okay, I'll do it right now.
Go ahead, Jessica.
While we have it kind of open, and jobs, I know technically they're parks, but it's kind of a land use issue in many cases as well. Jobs joint operated playgrounds, joint operated parks. We lost a job in ECF, which was, the foundation for a bunch of lawsuits and a whole lot of delays and, there's also a recipe for a job that doesn't exist yet. They're good when they work. It doesn't exist yet on East 101st Street, which was named Cicely Tyson Way, which is Sunshine Playground, which has land that is jointly owned between DSS and Parks, and managed by Wynn, and can't manage it right now, and it's a blight, but it could be a park, if it were a job. So where we lost a job, can we gain a job? It would be wonderful, Candy, if there's an opportunity to have maybe like a subcommittee or a cross-committee working group on some of these things that don't fit neatly into a box. Thank you for bringing it up. Hopefully we can continue the conversation.
Thank you, Jessica. Go ahead, Jessica.
Just one final point on that, which is that in the Parks Committee, Parks Tours 2 years ago, or last year, I guess, we visited all the parks in the neighborhood, including joint operated playgrounds and parks. So there should be photos and records of the visit and what was seen and observed in those parks.
Those are in our drive.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay,
Okay,
any
mark it.
additional points? Okay,
It might be in my drive.
yeah, any old business?
For the-
You did, okay, no news, no news. I'm gonna call the meeting adjourned at 8:18. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
You want to do a roll call before you? We can do it.
Sure, let's do it.
I'm just checking.
For all time's sake, let's do it. Let's do it. Thank you, let's do it. All right, let's do it.
Nobody left. If there was a concern or form, I would have called for one. Thank you though, for I appreciate your patience.
I don't wanna get shot later on, but. Deb Rehal is absent, Kenneth Crouch.
Here.
Thank you, Jessica Elliott.
Present.
Arnice Foster Hernandez.
Present.
Oh my God, what is going on? Pascal Hanau. Present. That was Arnice. Pascal Hanau. Present. Thank you. Jewel Jones.
Present.
Jessica Morris.
Here.
Nilsa Orama.
Present.
Beverly Pabon.
Present.
Derek Sampone.
Present.
Vinnie Torres.
Excuse.
The sent
Jason Jason Villanueva. Andy Rivers Vasquez.
Present.
Thank you.
Thank you, please.
Thank you, Jen.
I'm trying to make it.
Right, oh, that's. Right.